So my name is Jim Fallows. I'm a writer for The Atlantic. I've been to the Ideas Festival many a time over the years. Were you making a, okay, so sound, how is the sound now? Okay, I'll start again. Greetings, my name's Jim Fallows. I'm a writer for The Atlantic and a veteran of the Ideas Festival. Over the years, The Atlantic and Aspen have been privileged to put on this session. We have a wonderful next hour ahead of us, or 50 minutes ahead of us, with Timothy Greenfield-Sanders, who you may all know as a photographer and a filmmaker who has a project to unveil. He will partly unveil for us here. Partly is going to be in secret, that I think will be of both intellectual and personal interest to many members of the audience. It's about the baby boomer generation. What my children think of as the dreaded or hated baby boomer generation, what we all actuarialists know as the major baby boomer generation. You're going to tell us how we should think of it. You'll see in a few minutes some samples of Timothy's work over the years, from projects like The Black List and The Latino List and The Out List, a wonderful film called About Face, supermodels then and now, about the way models reacted to the passage of years. One called Thinking XXX or XXX, about porn stars, and a film about Lou Reed. He's done wonderful portrait photographs that have been shown all over the place for people ranging from Orson Welles to Jimmy Carter to George W. Bush and Hillary Clinton. And this fall, with its premiere on September 23rd, and it's an event at the museum on October 1st, there's going to be a series there's going to be a film in the American Masters series called The Boomer List. I'll stop now, explain the concept of why there are 19 people you're going to be showing in this project, why you're only going to talk about a few of them now, and just give us a little bit of the background of the 19 people we're going to see.
The Boomer List is the 19 years of the Boomers, which is 1946 to 1964. So the idea for this film was to pick one person per year and to try and do a wide range of talents and ethnicities and balance of men and women. It is a nightmare of a project to have done. And more of a Rubik's Cube, because once you've kind of picked someone from, let's say, a musician, you're locked out for the rest of these 18 years of picking another musician. At least these are the constraints that I put on myself. So,
and you have to keep most of these people secret, right? Because why?
The PBS, which is airing the film next month, has an opportunity to announce it to the television critics, and they'd like that to be the moment when, because there are journalists here, that's when the world knows who's in this film. This is so important.
But you're going to be able to tell us some of the names, right?
Yes,
and so I know there are people on tenterhooks throughout this audience. Is it going to be me? And so soon you'll know whether you're one of the five. So before we talk about those 5 people, those 19 people, we have a couple minutes of the really extraordinary photos that Timothy has done over the years. And so why don't we begin that presentation now, and you can tell us what we're about to see. So if you could now show the photos.
So I'm going to, I put a little something together just to kind of explain my career, which I think if I just do this, yeah. You all recognize Andy Warhol. I took this, I think, in 1978. But he was such an important influence on me as a teenager, and the idea that New York was this place where there were underground films and people like Lou Reed existed, and it kind of was where I wanted to be. And I ended up going to Columbia University and being in New York and meeting Warhol, which was very important to me. And I started to, let's see if this works. There. So I eventually went to film school in California after Columbia University, and I went to the American Film Institute. And I was really determined to be a filmmaker. And it was at this school that I started to meet people who came to seminars there, like Alfred Hitchcock. And I was sort of raised my hand that I could take the pictures for the school. And I started to photograph these seminar guests. And literally Hitchcock said to me, your light's in the wrong place. What are you doing? And I said, I really don't know what I'm doing. He said, well, come to the studio tomorrow. I'll introduce you to people. And he took me under his wing. And I was very, very fortunate. And I don't know if this, am I pointing there? So I think I'm going the wrong way. Let's say there. Betty Davis was there. And I kneeled down to do her portrait, and she said, "What the fuck are you doing shooting from below? You know, you never shoot from below." And and then she said, "Can you drive a car?" And I said, "Well, sure." She said, "Well, drive me around, I'll teach you about portraiture." And I drove her around for a week and fell in love with photography more and more, you know, kind of at AFI, where I was really a filmmaker, but I was becoming a photographer. And Orson Welles, I consider this my first great picture. And I shot this. It was I'm going to be too long if I do all these stories, but Orson was, I remember shooting him, and I was so excited to meet him. And I said something like, you know, "What's your favorite film?" And he said, "I don't play games like that." And I realized at that moment that my job as a photographer was I should have said, you know, "Would you like some water? Are you comfortable?" My job was not to be a tourist, but my job was to make him feel at ease in front of the camera. And I started to learn so much kind of working with these legendary people. And I also, I guess I'm hitting the wrong thing, but I'll try and be better. And I moved into very large format photography. This is an 11 by 14-inch camera. Nobody in those days was shooting large format. And I moved to New York. It's moving all over the place, but there you go. Anyone know who that is? That's Willem de Kooning. Oh, it says so, right?
It's a smart crowd. They can read.
So I started photographing the world that I loved, which was the art world. That's Elaine de Kooning. And through my father-in-law, I knew all the abstract expressionist painters. And I started to shoot. Anyone guess who that is? Robert De Niro's father.
Wow.
Who said that?
Okay, you can be one of the 19.
You get a DVD. Oh, okay.
Okay, you're off the list.
You get a DVD at the end. Come pick it up. Okay.
Oh, no, I'll take the DVD.
Okay. And so I continued shooting the art world, and 20 years later, I had an exhibition of 700 portraits of the art world that I had done on this large format camera, 1999, of everyone I had shot in the art world. Art critics, art artists, art collectors, art curators, and it was a show at Mary Boone Gallery in New York, and it was for sale only as the entire show. You had to buy all 700 portraits. And it was an edition of 4 sets, and we sold one to MoMA and one to the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, one to a crazy collector, and I kept one. So it was a very happy ending to that. And I'm very proud of that body of work as well. And I started to become known for my portraits and ended up shooting people like this and this and this, and started to do magazine work as well, and worked with a giant Polaroid camera, the Bushes here. This was an interesting day.
Was that in the White House?
It was in the White House, and
Wow.
this was at the White House as well.
Ah, wow.
One of my favorites.
Yeah. One of hers, too, I bet.
Yeah.
It's a great photo.
It is. And I met Lou Reed, who was my, teenage hero. We became friends. I did his portrait and started to film him and photograph him, and he would invite me to things, and I would shoot with these little video cameras that they were very popular then. And I amassed a lot of footage, and I got back into filmmaking in a kind of backwards way that way. And I went to my friend at American Masters, Susan Lacey, and I said, I have all this footage. I think it's a documentary, maybe a short on Lou Reed. And she said, no, we've never done a rock and roll star. He's an American master. Why don't you direct a film about him? And I ended up making my first film, Lou Reed Rock and Roll Heart, which these are people who are in it, David Bowie, Patti Smith. And it went to Sundance, and I won a Grammy. So
Yeah.
I didn't think Grammys were important until I won one. Then I think it's a big deal. And I also then was really expanding into other areas, and I had never shot nudes, but I had seen a movie called Boogie Nights. The other X is supposed to be on the line with it. I think it's a PowerPoint issue. And I had seen Boogie Nights and thought of porn stars as a sort of people for the first time. and began to think about an idea to do portraits of porn stars. And that developed into a project. I look like Hugh Hefner there, don't I? Into a kind of elaborate project idea of clothed and nude porn stars, in which I also did a film for HBO and a DVD and a soundtrack and everything, and a book, a very popular book as well. There it is, Jenna Jameson on the cover. And I got Gore Vidal to write the introduction and 14 other amazing writers to write about pornography from every different point of view. And this is just a project I'm very proud of. This was in the middle of the war, and was the first sort of series like this that people were starting to pay attention to the injuries of veterans. James Gandolfini did the interviews. It was a film for HBO called A Live Day. And these are my portraits of a lot of the soldiers and Marines. And then the blacklist. So to kind of quickly explain this, I felt that my portraiture could come to life in some way and that I could use my filmmaking abilities. And I did a series called The Blacklist, which was interviews with leading African Americans on race, identity, struggle, achievement, looking directly into camera so that they looked sort of like my portraits come to life. And this was on HBO. Elvis Mitchell did the interviews. We got, incredible people to be in it, and it became a very popular series. And I also exhibited the portraits that I did first at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, and then around the country at other museums. And Volume 1 became Volume 2 and Volume 3, and then we did. I'll go through quickly, but you can kind of see the portraits. Faye Waddleton, some of the names are there, yeah. Al Sharpton. And these are all shot on an 8x10 camera. They're large format portraits. I guess we could you play that real quick? Maybe. We can skip it. Let's just skip it. Yeah, you might see it? Okay. See if they can do it.
This looks like it's about to happen.
Blacklist, what does that connote to you?
Blacklist? Doesn't blacklist mean people on a list that don't work anymore? Do you get treated like black people?
My father's wit, his stories, his cool. This isn't history to me. Black culture leads.
I had to fight for virtually every single thing.
Writing for me is the only free place.
Who are we and what are we doing here?
We just wanted to be somebody.
I'm not the ambulance chaser, I'm the ambulance.
I never thought that I was only worth what they said.
Forget what your color is. That's somebody else's problem.
It's never been monolithic.
People really can be persuaded to think differently.
Authenticity.
Identity, human identity.
No, honey, I am black. No.
I get goose pimples when I talk about it.
There's always going to kind of be an overreaction one way or the other.
So that became a very popular project that HBO had. It aired at Sundance, and here's the exhibit. There it is at the National Portrait Gallery, which showed all 50 of the portraits. It was a huge, important moment for me in Washington and in the museum world. And then the Latino list happened, as you can imagine. And Sonia, I call her Sonia. So we did this, and then last year did the Outlist for HBO as well, which aired the day before the Supreme Court announcement. Good timing. Larry Kramer,
Wow.
Lady Bunny. Supermodels happened because I went to a party and saw these women there and thought, this is how interesting these older women are who were one time so beautiful. What happened to them? And I turned that into a film for HBO about women between 50 and 80 years old who were the most beautiful women of their day and what happened to their lives and how they recreated themselves and moved on from that. Carmen, one of the fabulous models, amazing. And then this little project called the Boomer List. So these are the ones we're allowed to talk about.
Okay, great.
Deepak Chopra, Erin Brockovich, let's see, Billy Joel, very good. Who said that? Oh, you've already got a DVD.
No. He's a new one. He's a new one. Ooh, already in the realm of mystery.
There, we missed one. I think it was Amy Tan and, oh, you're seeing something you shouldn't see. I
figured that out.
Yeah, you see that in the other one. So we'll go past that. Okay.
So here's the heartbreaking news. If any of the people you saw there was born in the same year as you personally are out, because it's only one per year. So we can really look forward to this. So let me now ask about, I'd love to ask about driving Betty Davis for a week. That must have been education, or spending a day with George W. Bush at the White House. But instead, let me ask you about this latest Boomer project, and we're going to see a trailer from it shortly. A marvelous thing about your work in recent years has been these collective portraits, you know, the porn stars and the soldiers and blacks, Latinos, and people who are out. Did it seem natural or a stretch to extend this to a generation, which in a way is shaggier than any of these other groups?
No, I've always loved being able to put projects into a box in a way. So when I did the art world, and that ended up to be 700 portraits, that was this sort of collection that and even the soldiers was a collection of 20 portraits, and certainly the Black List, all of these. So the 19 years, I don't like 19, I wish it were 20, and I have an idea of how to make it 20, but 19 is okay, so I think there'll be 19 portraits. The hardest thing to do for this project was to pick the people, and I think I could illustrate that by...
This paper shows the secret ones, too.
Yes.
I can see some of them if I peer carefully.
If we just take 1946, Bill Clinton, George Bush, let's see, Reggie Jackson, Ron Kovic, Bob Vila, Barbara Koppel, Cheech Marin, Dolly Parton, Patti Smith, Oliver Stone, and you get the picture. So how do you pick the one person for that year? Who would you pick?
And how did you pick the one person?
Well, and I can't really talk about the one person, so... But
that's true.
Let me put it this way, it's about Vietnam. So I think Vietnam was a moment that we have to address as boomers, and that was the choice for that year, was a way to talk about Vietnam.
And so as your Rubik's Cube exercise, once you did that, that then excluded others on that theme, and so then
exactly.
Conceptually, so which part of the puzzle did you solve first?
I think the way we did this project was we reached out to people we knew we could get who were important enough to be considered an American master, certainly Deepak and Erin Brockovich and people like that, Amy Tan. So once we got those positions in place, it eliminated the author, it eliminated the environmentalist, it eliminated the musician, and it tightened up our choices in the other years.
And so what, as you did this exercise, did you end up thinking there was actual coherence to the idea of a boomer generation, which has how many millions of people in it?
I think, Myrna, how many millions of the boomers? 108? 78 million? Okay, so I get to pick 19 people out of 78 million. It's difficult. I think, I was looking for people that were emblematic, people that you would look at this person and say, well, that person represents not only maybe that year, but also an accomplishment or a signatory of the boomer generation.
And when people have seen this film, we all know the range of talents and personalities and skills and disciplines you've included in it. Will it change any of the prevailing narratives about the baby boomer generation, either that they/we are so irresponsible and eating up the national prosperity, that we destroyed the country during the Vietnam years, or whatever? What perceptions of the boomer era do you think will be changed by people who watch your film?
You know, I'm a boomer. I'm born in '52. I couldn't put myself in the film. At least my wife said I couldn't. I think that it's a tremendous generation. I mean, you can't, when you start a project like this, you start to think about what's been accomplished by these people, and you try and limit it as I have. It's so hard. I mean, Wozniak, who turned us down at first, and I wrote him a letter and said, you have to do this. Please, please be in this film. I think you're so important to the generation and what you've accomplished in your life. And he relented. And we went to shoot him in Los Gatos, California. He arrived on a Ninebot, which is a Segway-like device, the newest one. It's called a Ninebot. And he pulled up to the place we were shooting. And I met the nicest person I've met in years. I mean, this is just the kindest person. It was someone that I just loved at the end of this interview, and who has done so much with his life in ways that, you know, he deserves a 10-hour documentary, this guy. And so brilliant. I've met a lot of people. This is one of the most brilliant men I've ever met.
And you all know Steve Wozniak, the less publicized Steve of the Apple founding
Invented
era.
the personal computer. And he just told these stories about growing up in California and what motivated him. And I was very moved by him.
And given the tech revolution has been such an important part of the baby boom era, I would assume that including him by proxy would include people like Bill Gates or Eric Schmidt or, of course, the late Steve Jobs or others.
Bill Gates turned us down. We have a very elegant list of people who turned us down. And some people, I'm happy they turned us down. I won't go into why, but we reached out to certain people.
And in just a minute, I'm going to ask you to show the brief trailer here, but one other question about an aspect of, two other aspects of boomer politics that have been so important. One is political activism itself. You know, we've had several presidents. Bill Clinton and George W. Bush were born in the same year. Al Gore, was born a year later. Hillary Clinton was born, I guess, the same year as Gore. I think.
Yeah.
John Kerry was just before your cutoff. I think there's how you found somebody to stand for that kind of political involvement and the political protest part. I guess would that be Aaron Brockovich?
Well, Aaron certainly. You all know who Aaron Brockovich is. Julia Roberts, others have. And I grew up very, very involved in working to save the environment, if you will. She was a hero to me. I think she's an incredible person and a very real person, if you can put quotes around them. A great interview. Used her hands a little too much, but that happens. And she's someone that everyone knows. You know, I think even outside the United States, a lot of these names are U.S.-centric to some extent. Certainly Billy Joel's known worldwide. But Aaron Brockovich is known everywhere, and probably because of the movie.
Yeah. Let's take a minute to see one of the trailers, and I'm going to follow with some more questions. There's another brief trailer for this project.
Go back to the beginning, perhaps?
One thing I learned when I worked for 6 months on a program design team at Microsoft, all of their internal demos also failed at Microsoft itself. So I think this is something that's consistent inside the company and out. Well, if we were seeing this, what would we be seeing?
We give it 10 more seconds? What do you think? What I've tried to do when I open each segment is to show a handful of photographs of other people born that year. So maybe it's going to come on now. Let's see.
Come on, I'm from Kansas. I'm not a part of this Hollywood experience.
I was called a quack. I was called a fraud.
My mother's idea of the American dream was to move up in the world, to move into a better house, to have these symbols. It's the experience of an immigrant. You leave a certain history behind you and you get to start over. I grew up also thinking that I was not equal to a man, that I was better. That is something that women had to strive for, as this women's liberation was happening.
I'm gonna be 65 this year. I gotta keep my mind active, or else my mind will occupy me, and that's when you get in trouble. I thought there was a mandatory retirement age in rock and roll. Obviously, there isn't. These artists just keep going and going. So I'm just kind of doing that. That's what I do.
Be More, PBS.
Great. So I was going to ask you about how, there are two other huge movements of this boomer era. One, the women's movement, the other, the environmental movement. And can you tell us how you thought about capturing both of those themes in this series?
Well, certainly the environmental movement, Aaron, and the women's movement is wonderful in this film. We looked at civil rights, gay rights, environment, women's movement, Hollywood, entertainment, all of the sort of big themes that we could think of, and then tried to find people that would fit into them. I think what we do when we're shooting these interviews is they usually come to my studio in New York. They sit in a chair for an hour, and they look into a monitor, into a camera where they see the interviewer. So they're staring into camera that way the whole time, and they're seeing the person who's asking them questions. Of course, we never hear the questions. So we're getting them kind of to talk about their lives. The hardest part is that so many famous people have sound bites that they are comfortable with. And you know them because you can read them on Wikipedia, and everything is out there. So the difficulty is getting people to talk about something new, or to open up, or to be emotional, or to say something that is meaningful that's not a kind of PR soundbite.
And actually, this brings up something that I hadn't thought of until this second, but I want to ask, when that happens in the print reporter's life, if I'm interviewing some politician or well-known person and they're giving me the sound bites, the way I can usually get them to do something else is either just to be quiet or to act bored. Because most people who are prominent, they don't want to bore you, and they don't like silence on the interviewer's end. Does that work in your business too?
They always want to fill the space. It does. I think you have to kind of get their confidence in some way, and to earn their confidence. And there are a couple where I feel like you go back later and you think, God, why didn't I ask this, or why didn't we do that? An hour is a lot to get 4 great minutes, so it works pretty much with everyone. But I always rethink it and think, I wish I had asked this or that. There's one person who's in the film, not particularly well known, but represents 1954, and she's teary at one point, and it's such a powerful moment. I love this moment, and it's very real, and she's holding back her tears.
And was there anybody, on the other hand, where you had chosen that person, you got them in front of the camera, and you thought, this just isn't going to work, this person is not interesting enough?
No. I've never. There was one person for one of the lists that we didn't use because she was just not. She had nothing to say. But she was 26 years old.
So yes, yeah. So one of my, again, a parallel experience in journalism is I find on a big reporting project, I have to go in there with a number of assumptions and questions I want to ask, because if you don't do that, you go nowhere. But it's always the things you hadn't known you were looking for that are rewarding and that shape the final story. By analogy, what do you know about either American life or that era in history now, having filmed these 19 interviews, that you didn't know at the beginning?
Oh, that's a great question. I considered myself pretty knowledgeable, but I think when you start to meet these are remarkable people, all of them. They're just so accomplished, and I think you get to appreciate them as people. I'll tell a story here about Monica Lewinsky. I remember being asked to do her portrait, and I said to my wife, I've been asked to do this portrait next week, and what do you think? And she said, absolutely not. And I said, well, it's rare to get asked to shoot someone at the peak of their fame. That's the moment you want to shoot them. And of course, I said, I'm going to do it. And she said, well, why the fuck do you ask me if you're going to do it anyhow? So,
all marriages are the same.
So she came into the studio for the portrait, and 25 minutes later, Karen said, you were right. She's so different from what I have read about her. I'm meeting her. It's a very different experience to kind of meet people who are famous from what the kind of creation of them is by the media.
Yeah. In just a minute, I'm going to turn it over to the audience for questions. I have a couple other things to ask you. One, perhaps a surprisingly practical-minded one. I think I am with the majority of most human beings in that I hate having my picture taken. And there's something just so off-putting about standing there and knowing this is being frozen in time. First, is that in fact a majority sentiment? And second, how do you get people past it?
Oh, well, I think most people, even professionals, hate it. Yesterday I shot someone, I can't tell you who it is, but he's an athlete, and athletes are the worst because they have no sense of the importance of a photograph. They just don't get it. And it was the hardest one of the series so far. I think from the moment someone walks in the door, and it goes back to that Orson Welles moment, I am keenly aware of how they're feeling. I have this sort of sixth sense in a way where I can read them emotionally. I can get them to a point when they're in the makeup room or we're sitting upstairs having coffee, and I start to gain a certain amount of trust. And so by the time that person is in front of the camera, there's a relationship that I've created. It's not like they come in, they sit in front of the camera, and I take a picture. You have to kind of build that. And it works very, very well with these interviews as well, to take that little bit of time and get to know the person, it's great in my New York studio because they get to see who I am. It's my house. I have an art collection. They get to kind of know me rather than a cold studio. And I think that I don't take a lot of photographs. People pose in front of my large format camera. I take 6, maybe 8 frames, and that's it. So it's being able to look at a face. I mean, I can look at your face, and I know that that's your best angle. It's just
it's
easy
taken me
for
all
me.
these years to know that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Well, that's the first talent as a photographer. You need to be able to look at any face and kind of know, where is it most beautiful. So I can do that. And then I remember with the supermodels, they would come in. These are women who are, have been shot by the greatest photographers ever. They would come in, we would talk, and they'd come into the set, and I'd watch them look at my lighting, and there was like a tension that would go away because they knew they were going to look good the way I had lit them.
So the other question I want to ask before inviting questions from the audience is, do you have any future collective portraits like this in mind? After, in the sequence from the Blacklist onward to the Boomers, what would come next?
I'm kind of in an enviable position. Because of the supermodel film, I've been asked to do 3 fashion films that I've been offered. I'm not sure which one I would do, but they're all quite interesting. I don't know. I have so many opportunities right now. I have to kind of decide. What I'd like to do is take a month off and do nothing. It would be wonderful. But that's a good position as a boomer to be in.
Yes, those are good problems to have.
Yeah.
So if you'd like, there will be microphones moving around the room from left to right. I can't really see where they are, so I'm going to say, okay,
There's somebody
yes,
right
here we
there.
go.
Many long years ago, I had a photography business, and my camera was a 4x5 speed graphic.
Oh, of course.
Camera of choice in that era, and because I took pictures of 150 faces in one negative. Why, in this generation, with the kind of equipment that we have, are you using a large format black and white or color camera? And where do you get the film?
Well, it's a great question. The Art World series you all saw, the 700 portraits, they don't make that film anymore. It was a gorgeous portrait film called Ectopan that was very skin sensitive. It couldn't see pimples. It was just a beautiful film. They stopped making it, and I switched to 8x10. In answer to the question, I fell in love with large format portraiture, back with Betty Davis was telling me about Hurrell. And I learned about these great Hollywood photographers, and they shot in large format. So it was something that was so against the time. Everyone was shooting 35 millimeter and journalistically shooting, and I was sort of shooting these formal portraits and became known for them. And just, if you shoot the way I do, you love large format. It's a very hard way to shoot, but it's very rewarding. You take a picture, you take only a handful of pictures, and it's a challenge to you to kind of get it right.
I understood your comment about taking exposure.
Yeah.
But when we look at it on the screen...
So hold on a second till the microphone comes. Yes, okay.
Or when you show it, your audience isn't going to realize...
Well, I show it, it's 4 by 5 feet at the National Portrait Gallery, so these 8x10 negatives can be blown up very, very big and still have tremendous quality and beauty, whereas the digital camera, it'll get there, it's not quite there yet. I like digital. I think it's amazing to see the feedback of digital. To shoot something and look at it right away, you learn so much from that moment as a photographer.
Yes, so where is the next microphone? Okay, over here, yes. In front. And then I'll come to you. Yes.
So I have to just start by saying how good and warm you've probably made my wife feel and me feel from a number of perspectives. So I just want to take a moment.
He gets a second DVD.
It may be coming. First, de Kooning and Warhol. They both used to visit my wife's father, who was a physician in New York. So that's a connection that I feel. Billy Joel, he grew up in Hicksville, Long Island. I grew up in Hicksville, Long Island. In fact, one of my partners is his cousin. The film HBO that you did about coming out, my partner's all in Boston, who you may know, was very much deeply associated with the film. So there's this connection I feel, and of course, I love music and I love the things that you've presented. The question that I wanted to ask is, a big part of the generation that you're focusing on, and I was born in 1956, became something called the me generation. Do you cover it from that angle at all?
I don't see it that way. I have always looked at the people I've always been interested in people who I find to be achievers, who have done something remarkable with their lives. So I would never look at the boomers in a negative way, because I would just, it's the way I am. I look at this as, these are accomplished people. Who am I interested in meeting, shooting, recording? I wouldn't have shot all those artists if I didn't love the art world and artists and had great interest in it. And I did the Blacklist because I started to think about, so many of my friends were African Americans, and I thought, well, there's Oprah and there's Barack Obama, and that's all people think about. There's Dick Parsons, and there's Faye Waddleton, and there's Toni Morrison, there's so many other people. Should I do something about that? And I went to a curator, Thelma Golden, who's the head of the Studio Museum, and I said, a white guy doing a series on Black America. And she said, well, no one can do what you do. You should do it. And maybe some people will attack you, but fuck that. And I kind of have always looked at everything I do as these people are interesting to me. These are people who are so accomplished and have struggled. They're not all artists, but you don't have to be an artist to struggle in your life. And it's not easy putting yourself out there, putting yourself in front of the public. So that I admire in all of these people.
Someone over here, yes.
Hi, we love your work, Marvin and I. We're from Houston, and I noticed that you had some exhibits in Houston. Is there a Houston connection?
The Houston connection was the museum bought my Art World series, and my dealer there, Hiram Butler, has been very helpful. And there was a guy named Peter Maggio, who was the head of the museum. He's now dead, but loved my work and believed in the Blacklist when I was doing it early on and said, we're going to show this, and made it happen. So, certain people support you in different ways, and you have to kind of in your life look for those people to kind of make things happen. It's very hard to make these films and to get these shows done, and there's a lot of people who have been behind me, and PBS is one right now that I'm very indebted to, and AARP as well, who saw this as an important project that's 50 years since the last boomer. You know, this is 2014. It's the 50th anniversary. So it's a perfect time to do this project. And you know, timing is everything. How's our timing?
So we have time for one or two more questions. Is there one on this side? Yes, there's one over here, and then we'll come back here. Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you for your work on the Outlist. I'm with a group called the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, and we've worked to bring screenings of that film all across the country. So personally got to see a lot of people watch it and touch many, many people's lives. It's really exciting, and most recently at the United States Capitol building, which was incredible to have something like that on the Hill. Because of the timing of when that film came out and some of the perspectives that are before a lot of the landmark decisions, a lot of people have asked me, do you think there will be an Outlist Part 2, say maybe like 5, 7, 10 years later, to look at the progress in the LGBT equality movement? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'd love to do one now. I think it's, you know, the gay movement in America changes every 24 hours, and the last few months, the cases that have gone state by state, it's just an amazing thing to see, excuse me, what's going on nationally. You know, I'm toying with an idea about transgender America as well, because that's a very difficult subject for a lot of people, and I think it would be very powerful to have a film to talk to maybe 15 people. So I'm thinking about that, and Janet Mock, who was in the Outlist, is just extraordinary and is going to work with me on that. So.
And we have time for a question here. This woman, yes.
I love photography.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. I love photography, but I have an 18 and 21-year-old, so I would like to know, what do you think of the selfie?
Yeah.
A very famous celebrity who's in this film, who I can't name, took one while we were shooting his portrait for this film, and it went all over Twitter, and I love selfies. I mean, I think, you know, I would say that the digital camera and cell phones have destroyed photography for photographers, that everyone takes pictures now, and that they've been devalued, and that if you look at what happened, you know, magazines where it used to be a real business for photographers to shoot editorially, and there were ads that you would shoot and make a lot of money, all of that's gone. And it's gone because the magazine business is gone, and because photography is now so easy to do, in a sense, and there's no real appreciation of quality. So I have mixed feelings about it. And I love digital photography on one hand. On the other hand, it's the end of an era. It ended an era, I'll put it that way.
That leads to the two brief bullet point questions I'm going to ask you before we let you go. One is, as an artist in the field of photography, what's the main thing you wish that all sort of casual, amateur, digital era photographers knew to do a better job? And what's the thing you most hope people will say after they see this Boomer film?
All right, the first one I would say, everyone frames everything wrong. Everyone puts the head in the middle of the frame. You should have very little headroom, and you should always shoot, as Betty Davis said, shoot from above. Bring your camera as high as you can and shoot down on people. They always look better that way. You never want to shoot like this. Unless you're a perfectly chiseled fashion model, you're not going to look very good from below. And I think the takeaway for the Boomer list is that it's entertaining, that you've learned something, that you've been surprised by the choices that we made, that you learned something that you maybe didn't know about these people. I can say I'm very proud of the list. I wish I could share it with you. So September 23rd, tune into PBS.
Well, I will be watching, and please join me now in thanking Timothy.